out of the ordinary insights. Brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
I'm chatting to Michael Mack, the CEO of Syngenta. You're watching Captains of Industry on CNBC Africa. Let's go back to that question on your leadership style. How do you define yourself as a leader?
As most leaders, I think most good leaders, I try to look for consensus where you can get it, and if consensus doesn't emerge, you've got to mobilize. Short-term, long-term is another thing that Syngenta I think has been pretty good at over the years, where the delivery of results and performance-based activity is really important, and yet at the same time, if we're not plotting for where we're going to be in 10, 15, 20 years, we're an R&D-based company, you know that, and the sorts of things we're going to start inventing this year won't come to market until 2024. So you must necessarily have to have a foot both in the short and the long term, and the culture of the company lends itself to that.
Michael, you've had a long and successful career in global corporate, let's say. What is your advice to others aspiring to achieve success in a corporate environment?
Well, I mean, my first piece of advice would be to learn a lot of the different functions of a company, because if you, and here I'm referring to private industry as opposed to government or some other undertaking, but it would be to understand how it works, understand the difference between smaller firms and the sorts of things that they can do, and bigger firms and the kinds of things that they can do. And with bigger firms, you have to understand that leadership itself is, it takes a long time sometimes to move things, and the best way to move those things are to have common culture where people have a common set of values. So when I think about the importance of a leader, it is what kind of culture do you have, where do you want to take it, what are the values that are going to help you take it there, and then do you have the people on board that are going to get that done. So it's really, it's people, people, people is the theme.
How do you define the culture within the Syngenta fold?
I think people that are inside it, first of all, how do we know about this? When people come to the company new and then you chat with them after 30 days, what do they say? First of all, they say it's really intensive. And intensive as in they say, we've never worked harder, and they're surrounded by a lot of passionate people. And when you have an ambition like ours, which is to a step change in productivity of agriculture around the world, got a lot of thousands of men and women who are pretty passionate about their ability to make a difference on that. So intensive, it's passionate, and it's very performance oriented. So it's not a question of what have you done for me lately, but you know, we've got big goals, and the goals need to get delivered, and so it's a crucible of a lot of passionate people delivering on the day.
While we're discussing leadership, I think a key question is how you deal with mistakes. One, mistakes that you've made, and secondly, mistakes that people within your fold make.
Well, of course, you've heard this before, and I don't mean it to be a cliche, but you have to learn from your mistakes, and then you pick up and you move on. Business moves too fast, first of all, for anybody to imagine that you can have a mistake-free environment. So if we just have more successes than mistakes, and you have fewer mistakes than your competition, of course, then shareholders are going to entrust you with their capital before somebody else. So you know, plan for the worst, hope for the best, and somewhere in between, you can have a good track record on that. But I don't think avoidance of mistakes as such is something I would ever set out to do in its entirety.
Looking at UN forecasts, we're currently sitting with about 7.2 billion people globally, and by 2020 we're looking at that number increasing to 9.6 billion. I come back to that stat that Africa's got 60% of the world's arable land. You've stated that Africa has the opportunity not only to feed the people on the continent, but also to be an exporter of food going forward. How far are we from that reality?
Well, each country, of course, has a different ambition. I was very heartened. I won't go into the specific ministers or countries, but I was heartened to hear not that long ago one of them say, we regard the Brazilians as the competition for some of the calorie requirements in China. And that's quite an ambition when you hear about that, and it's really almost unimaginable for me to think that that could have been uttered a decade ago. So some crops in some countries really do have the means to be big export providers to some of these hungry nations. And is that a reality? It's a current reality, particularly when commodity prices go up, and so it's today and metaphorically tomorrow. It's not something that we have to wait a decade for.
So this is happening as we speak.
This is happening as we speak.
Syngenta is going to play a big part in that story. What is it? If you can explain to me, you mentioned that you're traveling across the continent and you've got your experts on the ground. What are your people on the ground doing at the moment in Africa?
Sure. Well, look, first of all, we are the largest crop protection chemical company in all of Africa. And here we are in South Africa. We reckon we have between 20 and 25% of the market share for crop protection chemicals, and we're the largest crop protection chemical company in the world. Now, if you're a grower and you want to, and you've got decent soil nutrition, maybe you've got good commercial seed. In order for you to make the most of that crop, you do have to protect it from pests. Pesticides are a controversial product, I know, in many parts of the world, but pesticides, they date back 5,000 years. There has to be a good way to be sure that these crops are protected, and we're the leader in it. So you ask, what do people do? I mean, what our people do is they get with their distributors, their dealers, and they get trained up on the safe and proper use of these chemistries.
So there's a transfer of knowledge that
Absolutely.
takes place, because that is obviously a big debate point globally as well, the transfer of knowledge.
How to do that? You know, let's not forget, these products are relatively expensive, and a grower, and the point about that is a grower already has a built-in incentive to use as few of them as they possibly can to ensure that it gets the job done. But this agronomic knowledge, when to apply these things, what to look for, and how they're working, all of this takes some knowledge transfer, and so we spend our time getting this capability mustered throughout the continent.
What about the value chain when it comes to agriculture? Yes. Because that is a key concern. You know, you can plant the crops, but then you've got the storage issues, and then finally getting them to market. Are you helping in that value chain process?
We're having some. I mean, we've co-invested with some other multinational companies, for example, in SAGCOT, which is the Tanzanian corridor, and there are some other like projects along the way. However, that's why I said earlier, one of the things that we focused on are crops that do not require a lot of processing, and by doing that, then the infrastructure that's required in order to help some of these farmers create markets for the first time is rather affordable. I'll put it that way, and I don't think.
So they're not huge storage requirements, and is what you're saying in the crops that you are saying require less processing?
I'm saying that storage requirements, when you've got a guaranteed market, are really inexpensive investments, and those investments I don't regard as being in the way.
We know that doing business across the continent involves, first of all, perhaps the engagement with government. So we're looking at public-private partnerships. Is that your strategy? Do you go in at a government level, negotiate, and then roll out on the ground into private players?
We've got some, we just did a survey in conjunction with Syngenta commitments from last week that show, I mean, around the world, countries believe that governments have the first most important responsibility for ensuring adequate food supply. The industry that I'm in, the crop protection chemicals and commercial seeds, it's a regulated industry. So we don't do anything, first of all, without permission from the government, but the government is also the context with which food is set in the first instance. So, so the government's understanding about how things are regulated, the government's understanding about how to best communicate with their farmers is an important context. Yes, we work with them, but most farmers, of course, are part of the market themselves, and they're entrepreneurs, and so we work with them quite directly through our distributors and dealers as well.
One of the other challenges that multinationals experience across the continent is the difference in regulatory regimes, country by country.
Yes.
You can't look at this continent and paint it with one brush.
I agree with you, and yet at the same time, many of the, and I say enlightened leaders, there are many of the leaders and heads of state of African countries today that do understand that harmonizing some of these regulatory environments will speed some of the transfer of these technologies from other parts of the world, and they're onto the file, and I think that's going to get those sorts of regulatory hurdles are, I say they're going to be not so much lowered, but if those regulatory frameworks can be better harmonized, then it's going to be a lot simpler to engage with.
Going back to a couple of the numbers that you've stated, you're saying that we're at $250 million in terms of the size of your business in Africa. You're striving for $1 billion in terms of size, and you're investing $500 million at this point. Where is that investment going, and how long is it going to take you to get to $1 billion?
Well, the billion on the continent by 2022, and we're going to be investing it, when I say along the way, and each year that this business that we have here gets bigger, it will draw more investment, and so that's, if you've looked at our balance sheet, you know, it's a very healthy balance sheet, so the business about the money isn't the thing. What is the limiting factor for us is always how aggressively are these markets being built first of all, and second of all, how quickly can we find distributors and dealers who are at a high enough standard to be able to impart the agronomic advice and the technology transfer. And so a lot of that capability building is going to have to be done first by us, but it's underway right now.
In trying to achieve the 24 billion revenue line that you've also stated by 2020, your biggest challenge that you think you'll be facing over the next decade?
I think the more people move from farms into cities, and I've said this before, that they have an idealized notion about where their food comes from. And I heard an expression not that long ago, the digestive elite. And by that digestive elite, it's quite, they meant that to be that
organic. Are we going with organic farming here?
It's that many people imagine that the word natural and food have to go together in such a way that technology doesn't play a role in it. Today, at 850 million people that are malnourished, as a percentage of the world's population, it's never been lower. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to drive down that percentage further, but technology has played an important role in bringing us this far, and it ought to be more respected than it is. I mean, at one basic level, let's not forget, farming is not a natural activity. In many cases, farming has to keep Mother Nature out because Mother Nature wants to have a go at that crop.
So as we move to the naturalist environment, you're going to continue to counteract that with education, is it, around biotechnology and biotechnology's involvement in agriculture going forward?
When we go and visit our customers and growers, people that live in the country understand how food is manufactured. When we go into the cities and you ask them, and people might be advocates for this farming method or that, and then you get behind that and they really don't have any experience with it. So if we can be a part of just giving people, again, who don't have any firsthand experience with farming a sense for how it really is out there, then I think that's worthy.
What do you want your personal legacy to be?
I want my personal legacy to, first of all, deliver on the goals we set for ourselves, but if somehow $25 billion by the end of the decade keeps us very focused. But if we can have been regarded as part of establishing agricultural technology as an important part of achieving a more sustainable world, I would have met some of the passions of the 27,000 people that work for us today.